Welcome to the HIT podcast, H.I.T, Human Resources, Insurance, and Technology. I'm your host, Toby Kennedy. We are dropping into your feed this Tuesday, every Tuesday. So like, subscribe, share, heck, tell a friend. We're doing what we do every week, which is what I hope is curating bite-sized, digestible content in a way that you trade us 15-ish minutes of your time and we bring to you some really, really great conversations. This week is no different. This week is sponsored by Montage Insurance Solutions. And without any further ado, I'd like to bring on our guest, Joy Chudacoff. Joy, thank you so much for joining us.
Toby, I'm looking forward to this. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited for this. So just, I think, maybe to start out and to give the audience a little bit of sort of who is Joy? How'd you find yourself to the chair? If you don't mind, just a brief introduction, kind of talk me through what's going on in Joy's world.
So thanks, Toby. So for the last 19 years, we have our company, Finding Joy Every Day, has been serving women business owners and corporate women executives in helping them to grow their leadership, grow their teams, grow their businesses. And I also have a podcast, and it's been on the air for 6 years. And I met Danon, who's with Montage Insurance. She was probably one of our very first interviews. I know she was in the first 5.
Yeah.
And I had read about her in the LA Business Journal, and that's how I found myself here to you today.
Yeah, I love that. So, all the kind of ties that bind, and then specifically your sort of, I don't know, I'm putting words in your mouth with the word mission, but your kind of professional successes have really been surrounding women and empowering women and bolding women.
Yes. Our main mission, our core mission is to help women lead with impact. And in order to lead with impact, Toby, you have to lead yourself.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my work with women and with executives and women business owners is in helping them to understand what those steps are, how to continue to elevate themselves for growth, and so that they can lead other people. It all starts with first leading self.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Can you unpack that? It's really interesting. Before we even go down any other rabbit holes, what do you mean by leading self?
Leading self means that having and being centered around a foundation of how you run or drive your day. So our clients are really exposed to what I call these align with 9 power practices. So there are things you've heard before, I'm sure, but we're really steeped in this process of how leaders need to today find time for silence and stillness.
Yeah.
And, I think we're all living with a lot of noise and distraction, more than we ever have. And
Absolutely.
As a result, it can sort of crowd out or take place of this time where we can get deeper into our eternal self, into our soul and spirit. Noise and distraction today keeps us from getting attached to that small voice inside, which can lead us really to our true genius, our true leadership ability, our true ability for impact.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a big fan of when I have folks on here to talk and they borrow from a lot of kind of ancient wisdom and established wisdom, because repurposing things as a hack to me feels like a hack. And when people are honest about, look, what I've done is reviewed a lot of good classic things that work. And, even if your trainer's like, it's diet and exercise, I'm going to walk you through the diet and exercise. It doesn't need to be this weird revolutionary thought.
You know what? That is so true. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. And you know what my clients find is that 15 minutes a day, and I believe it's nice to do it upon rising if you can. Sure. Now look, if you have small children at home, I remember that. I have 2 grown kids in college now.
Congrats.
But thank you. It makes it a little, that doesn't mean they've left the nest though. They're coming back.
Speaking of trends of 2024, right? Yes.
Yeah. They're empty nest, but they're coming back.
Right on. Well, congrats on that too, by the way. You're a human being they want to be around.
Yeah, absolutely.
They didn't run to the other side of the country and never turn back. So.
Yeah, that's very good, Toby. But just 15 minutes, but really you could start with 5 minutes of this getting really what I call falling in love with silence and stillness, and really hearing that still small voice inside. And I truly believe that it makes people, not just women, but people in general, better leaders.
Yeah. It's interesting. And again, I think that this sort of, borrowing. I'll back it up that I saw a comedian who was joking about how, at his age, he's like, growing up, you guys have this word mindfulness and being mindful. Is like, well, we didn't need that, right? I was sitting on the bus. I'd look at the dew fall off the window and stare out, and I could be with myself and be silent and still, because there wasn't 10,000 pings and pops and blings and blops and trying to get my attention. If I was moving somewhere, I was, I guess, inadvertently mindful, right? And we've gotten away from that, I think, in ways that maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but you're advocating for us to try to find a way back to.
Yeah, I'm advocating for that. I'm advocating for, I was just on a call before I came here with a group of women that I work with, and we were talking about how just taking an hour to 3 hours to 4 hours, whatever you can spare, and just going somewhere that's inspiring to you, whether it's the ocean, the desert, the mountains. I'm a mountain gal.
Yeah.
To just get away and get quiet and think about your team, think about your relationships, think about your business. And Toby, every time it happens, they come back renewed, and it magically somehow new business opportunities show up.
It's because there's the parts of the brain that are constantly talking and processing and are trying to be heard. And if we don't let them be heard because we're so focused in that like urgent, important box, that the maybe important but non-urgent speaker in our brain is trying to break through.
Yeah, it's very true. And, in addition to that, I said there were 9, and I'm not going to get into all 9 today. But, another big one that we hear it all the time, but we don't think of it in terms of, I think, how to be better leaders is also how we're fueling ourselves. Are we fueling ourselves with the right food so that our brains actually operate at their peak, right? Are we getting 8 hours of sleep a night, which is so important because that's when we, when we repair and recover.
Yeah.
And so many times, leadership seminars we go to are about, the bottom line, the numbers, the team, the social media, the marketing, all important. I use all that in my business. But if we want to be great leaders and really make an impact, we have to start here first.
Yeah. I talk about it all the time on the podcast that I honestly don't care the motivation. You might be coldly businessly motivated to see your profits. The process is the same. It starts with the self. It starts with a lot of those things that feel fluffy and airy-fairy, and you can extrapolate to the business. So like you said, you do in your talks, it's worth it either way. Whether you just want to be a good human being or you're just counting the pennies, it'll translate.
It does. And I feel like people who, at least I see it, people who are using these practices, they're more magical in their presentations about their mission and their vision because they're really connected to it, on a deeper level. So and by the way, I think as leaders, the other thing we're noticing is if you are managing a large team, when you take that time for self-leadership, self-care, grounding yourself in these certain rituals, you actually now have the capacity to really hear what other team members are coming to you with and solving these problems from a very calm space.
It's so interesting because I'm a big proponent on the skill of listening, the art of listening, the importance of listening, and to kind of hear you say, number one, in order to even do that in the first place, guys, we got to block out some of the noise and find a way to build mechanisms into our day that literally help us block out that noise so we can listen.
Exactly. I mean, I love that famous line from, I don't recall the movie right now, but it's with Uma Thurman and John Travolta. Famous movie. She's rolling that camera and she goes, I just have to ask you, he's sitting in front of her, are you one of those people who are waiting to talk or do you actually listen?
Yeah.
And I just can't think of the name of the movie.
It's Pulp Fiction.
Thank you, Pulp Fiction. Yeah, there it is. Yeah.
Yeah, there's another quote from Pulp Fiction. No, I'm just kidding. It's a great movie. I'm just teasing. Yeah, no, it's interesting because I think the joke baked into that, and the reason you bring it up, is a lot of us can be guilty of human beings. By what I mean by us, is that we are waiting for our turn to say the next thing that we've already preloaded and we've sort of pre-queued. And I'm bringing this back to the comment you made about the internal voice, the little voice, and also the other in the room, right? So when you were the leader in your analogy a moment ago, in both instances, we need to quiet ourselves down to hear what that other is saying.
Yes, yeah, we have to do that. It helps us quiet our minds. And when we practice that consistently, we just had come to our company the director of mindfulness at UCLA, and she told us that from 5 to 15 minutes consistently every day, just for 90 days, it completely changes the neural pathways in your brain.
Yeah.
And it helps us to become more peaceful. And I think that when we operate from a place of peace, I think that our leadership just extends to everyone around us.
Well, science is now saying the things that practitioners sort of long knew. So you knew inherently that this would be better for my neural pathways before some MRI showed it, because you've seen it in people, you've seen it in yourself. And I want to kind of keep us tethered to the listener who might be in human resources, in business, who's listening to this saying, you guys are on a nice philosophical conversation about sort of the airy-fairy, but A, it isn't necessarily airy-fairy because there's science behind it, but B, how do we bring that to a functional takeaway or a nugget for someone listening right now?
Okay, great. I love it. And this is for those your listeners who may have small children at home and some whose children have left the nest. You know, one simple thing that you can do is just commit to 5 minutes of stillness in the morning. And what I would recommend is the night before you go to bed, this will take just a couple minutes, the night before you go to sleep, just decide and set up that little area in your home where it's peaceful, it's quiet, you actually enjoy sitting there, and just plan for that area to be ready for you the next morning. And when you wake up, you go to that space, you put your phone on Do Not Disturb or silent, and you just sit. You can have your eyes open, your eyes closed, have your coffee, have your hot tea, and just sit for 5 minutes and begin to get used to the sound of nothingness. Because what happens over time, you'll start to really fall in love with it, and then 5 minutes is going to turn into 10, and 10 to 15, and you're going to start to, well, let me back up. Initially, you're going to be sitting there, Toby, and you're going to be thinking, this is silly.
Yeah.
I don't feel anything. All I can think about is my to-do list.
And this is, by the way, again, just to tether this to our conversation, this is in the name of making you a better leader.
Oh, yes.
A better person. So please keep going, because I think that, like we said, this is some of that preloading that you do for your day to make you a better business leader, operations manager, HR practitioner.
Yeah. And I love what you just said. Think about, Toby, preloading. That's what our computer does when we turn it on in the morning. It's preloading. It's loading up for the day, right? And so I sort of think about this as sort of like it's my immune, it's like my protector for the day before I go out to come from a place of peace. And so when your mind begins to wander and you say, this is silly, I can't stop thinking about my to-do list, I'm worried about my kids waking up, whatever it is, just remember, just bring yourself back. And I have had many of my clients choose a word. Yeah. So maybe the word that you're looking for is gratitude. Maybe the word you're looking for is peace. Maybe the word is hope for you. It just depends. Choose your word, and every time your mind wanders, just keep coming back. Peace. To-do list, dry cleaning, peace. And you just keep coming back for about 5 minutes, and you will notice that you're going to interact with your family in a different way, in a more positive way, and you're going to interact with the LA traffic if you live in LA differently, and with your team when you get to the office.
Yeah. Well, at least 20 minutes a week of your traffic should be absolute bliss, because you should be listening to us every week, week in and week out. So you get a good audiobook, you get a good podcast, and hopefully that helps move the needle for you a little bit on your reaction to traffic. But so I appreciate that, and I think that we're talking about sort of one's approach. And so I'd love to maybe ask you for another piece of information that you say, hey, look, Toby, I do this with leaders. I do this with leadership teams. I do this with women. I do this regularly. And something important I would like to impart upon your listeners that we haven't yet touched on is the thought of, or the idea of.
That's great. That's a great question. Thank you. So the one thing that we haven't touched on that I will leave you with is when we have new clients and people come to work for us, they're a little shocked at the first thing that I ask them, and that is, can we look at your schedule? Before I do anything else, it's like, can we take a look at your schedule? Because from looking at someone's calendar, how they live, if you will, from the time they wake up until the time they go to bed, that's going to tell me a lot about the work we need to do together. And so that is seeing, are you cramming so much that you're always running late from meeting to meeting? Are you never taking a break for lunch or to have a glass of water to hydrate? By the way, when you feel hungry, hunger and dehydration actually feel exactly the same. So sometimes you're not hungry, you just need a glass of water. And so these are things that I do immediately to find out, are they packing too much into their day?
Sure.
Are they staying up too late at night?
Yeah.
You know, I try to start with my clients a routine of shutting down all electronics and getting ready for good sleep. No later than 8 p.m.
Yeah.
Not going to bed at 8 p.m.,
Right.
but just preparing yourself.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've seen so many statistics over 19 years. We know now that it works. And so I would just say, if people are listening, and if you really try these simple things that we've talked about with Toby here today, you will see a dramatic change if you do it consistently in how you show up as a leader, and your family's going to notice it, your friends are going to notice it, and your business colleagues are going to notice it.
And so you say my clients, and I think that's kind of an interesting on-ramp to just asking you, how do people get a hold of you? Who's the type of folk that how might they?
Yes, thanks for asking, Toby. So our clients are typically women who either own their own business or they are an executive working for an organization in a leadership position. Those are the types of women who really seem to gravitate towards this type of work, because you have a lot of responsibility, you have goals, you have things you're working towards, and you want to make an impact. Those are the kind of women that come to us. And so the best way to reach us is, our website is findingjoyeveryday.com. And you can also, if you want to reach out to me personally to ask me any questions from the interview, you can reach me at joy@smartwomensolutions.com. And you can always find me on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn at Joy Chudacoff.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Joy. And I appreciate your time so much. I think that this has been really valuable to talk about kind of working on yourself. And I'll close with an analogy where one of my business coaches talks about how on a daily basis, you can spend a full day's work and you can look yourself in the mirror and say, I did a good day's work working in the business. Yes. You've got emails, you've got things going on. But every once in a while, you need to stop working in the business, zoom out, and work on the business, work on the bigger plans. And it's hard to do because, again, every day, day in and day out, you can be working in the business. I think the same is true of the self, right? You're working kind of all the time, and every once in a while you need to zoom out and work kind of on yourself and sort of, what's the arc? What am I doing? What's my morning routine? What's my daily routine? Those sorts of things. And in the same way that working on the business ultimately translates to the business being better, I think working on the self can ultimately translate to you being a better version of yourself. Right?
It really is. I mean, you can really feel, especially I think in today's climate, people are stressed. They are, so much attention, so much distraction, so many things that are working to get our attention all day long. And you really can feel fully alive and feel that energy. And it really is just a few slight tweaks.
Yeah. And I think you gave some really great ones today. And I appreciate your time. And folks, you know how to get a hold of Joy. If any of the things that she's saying sound like your cup of tea, right? So thank you so much for being here. Mm-hmm. Thank you guys for joining us. That is all the time we have on this week's episode of the HIT Podcast. Join us next week, Tuesday. Join us every Tuesday. And until next week, make this the best week yet.